Something inside Windsor had already gone wrong, long before anyone outside the palace noticed, and the moment Princess Catherine refused to read the palace-approved script, that hidden truth finally broke through. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. There were procedures, layers of approval, carefully engineered language designed to protect the institution first and the family second. But Catherine sat there, looked at the polished statement that had been rewritten by advisors over and over again, and made a decision that quietly defied the entire system. She pushed it aside. She chose her own words. And in that single move, she exposed something the palace had been trying to contain for months, a private recovery journey involving Prince Louis that had already begun to reshape power, control, and fear inside the royal household. The silence had not been accidental. It had been enforced. Engagements were being rearranged, schedules kept shifting, and the youngest prince simply vanished from public view without explanation. Questions started building, quietly at first, then louder. Why was Louis missing? Why no appearances? Why no acknowledgement? The palace gave nothing. That silence came from Prince William, who believed absolute privacy would shield his son from speculation, headlines, and long-term scrutiny. But that same silence began to twist into something else entirely, because inside the palace, Louis wasn't interpreting it as protection. He was starting to believe he was being hidden. And hidden meant something dangerous. Shame. The timeline tells a story the palace never intended to reveal. It began as something ordinary, a seasonal illness. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. But then the signs shifted. The tiredness didn't fade. The energy didn't return. Breakfast sat untouched. A child who once filled rooms with noise and movement suddenly pointed to his chest and told his father he was too tired to eat. That wasn't just fatigue, that was the first warning that something deeper had already taken hold. And by the time the family realized it, they were no longer managing a minor illness. They were navigating a serious respiratory condition that had already begun to change the rhythm of their entire household. Then came the moment that quietly shattered everything, a private rehearsal at Windsor. It was meant to be controlled, safe, a gentle return before stepping back into public life. No cameras, no crowds, no pressure, just preparation. But midway through, Louis stopped. He reached for Catherine's hand and whispered that he couldn't catch his breath. That single sentence collapsed the illusion that things were under control. Catherine knelt immediately, holding his hands, feeling how cold they were despite the warmth of the room. William reacted, instantly clearing the space, removing everyone except the medical team, ordering George and Charlotte away so they wouldn't witness what was happening. That decision revealed something critical. William wasn't just protecting Louis anymore, he was trying to contain a moment that had already crossed into fear. And while the palace continued projecting calm, the reality inside those walls was spiraling into contradiction. William shut down every engagement involving Louis without hesitation. No appearances. No risks. No exposure. He believed missing ceremonies didn't matter if it meant protecting his son. But senior aides saw the danger immediately. Absence creates attention. Silence creates speculation. They warned him that the longer this continued, the louder the questions would become. They pushed for a controlled explanation before rumors filled the gap. William refused. He chose control over narrative. But control, in this case, was already slipping. Because the silence didn't stay contained around Louis, it spread. George noticed first. As the eldest, he tried to become what he thought was expected. Calm, composed, strong. But that effort cracked one night when he asked William a question that had nothing to do with royal protocol and everything to do with fear. Could someone become seriously ill without anyone outside knowing? That wasn't curiosity, that was uncertainty. Charlotte saw it differently. She watched the closed doors, the lowered voices, the tension no one explained. And instead of asking, she acted. She started leaving handwritten jokes beside Louis's bed, quietly trying to bring back the brother she recognized. But even she couldn't escape the reality building around them. She overheard staff talking. She realized people outside were beginning to notice. And then she asked the question no one was ready to answer: would Louis have to explain himself to strangers? Catherine carried the weight of all of it. She reassured Charlotte while running on exhaustion. She protected William from her fears, while he did the same for her. Their partnership held, but it changed. Conversations became shorter. Silences became heavier. And at the center of it all was Louis. Too young to understand royal strategy, but old enough to recognize something was wrong. The energy that once defined him was gone. The laughter faded, and what replaced it was something far more dangerous: awareness. Then, everything escalated. Catherine wrote her own statement. She didn't ask permission. She didn't consult the final draft committee. She wrote it by hand and placed it in front of William after the children were asleep. The official version sat beside it, clean, controlled, emotionless, but her version told a different story. It acknowledged fear. It admitted uncertainty. It gave voice to what they had actually lived through, and the moment William read it, the conflict became unavoidable. He pushed back immediately. One statement, he argued, could follow Louis for the rest of his life. It could be dissected, analyzed, replayed endlessly. He wasn't wrong. But Catherine didn't step back. She delivered the one truth that changed the entire conversation. Louis believed he was being hidden because the family was ashamed of him. That wasn't speculation. That was what their silence had created. And suddenly, this wasn't about strategy anymore. It was about consequence. Because what had started as protection had become something else entirely, and the moment Catherine refused to stay silent, the entire balance inside the royal family began to shift. And someone else was about to decide whether that truth would be allowed to reach the world. The decision didn't end with Catherine and William, because inside this structure, no message moves without one final gatekeeper. And that gatekeeper was King Charles. The draft reached him late, after an evening briefing that had already outlined the risks. Public speculation, media reconstruction of timelines, scrutiny over every missed engagement. He dismissed the room before reading it. That alone was unusual. When Charles reads something in private, it means the decision is no longer procedural, it's personal. And as he moved through Catherine's words, something shifted. The line about a child mistaking privacy for shame didn't just describe Louis, it exposed a flaw in the system itself. For decades, the monarchy had relied on silence as protection. But here, silence had started to distort reality. William arrived soon after, and the conversation didn't circle around strategy, it went straight to consequence. Charles asked one question, but it cut through everything. Was this statement for Louis, or for the adults trying to manage their fear? That question reframed the entire situation. Because if the message served the institution more than the child, then it wasn't protection, it was control. William defended Catherine, but he didn't deny the risk. Once released, the narrative would no longer belong to them. Reporters would track every absence, every canceled appearance, every unexplained shift in schedule. The silence they had enforced would become evidence. But when advisors offered a safer version, one stripped of Louis's voice, one that removed his request to thank those who helped him, Charles rejected it. That was the turning point. The crown chose meaning over control. But even then, Charles placed one condition that revealed how carefully this moment was being handled. Louis had to hear the statement himself. Not a summary, not a simplified version. Every word. Because once it went public, it couldn't be undone. Catherine read it to him privately. And what happened next quietly redefined the entire message. Louis didn't react emotionally. He listened. Then he corrected a single phrase. He didn't want to be described as doing better. He wanted people to know he was getting strong again. That wasn't just wording, that was identity. And Catherine changed it immediately. When Charles approved the final version, he wrote something by hand that carried more weight than any official clearance. Truth, if delivered carefully, could protect the crown more honestly than silence ever could. The recording went out. No dramatic tone, no spectacle. Just Catherine speaking calmly, acknowledging the journey, confirming Louis's strength was returning. And the reaction was immediate, but not in the way the palace had feared. The phones rang. Headlines formed. But instead of speculation turning hostile, something unexpected happened. The tone shifted. Coverage didn't frame weakness. It framed resilience. But even as that narrative took hold, another process began behind the scenes. Analysts started reconstructing timelines, comparing past appearances, pausing footage, searching for signs they had missed. William saw it happening in real time. He turned off the television. Because in that moment, he recognized the cost. Once the story was public, it could become something else entirely. Outside Windsor Castle, something quieter and far more revealing was unfolding. Families began leaving handwritten blue stars along the gates, each one carrying the same phrase Louis had chosen: getting strong again. It wasn't organized. It wasn't announced. It just happened. One message became 10. 10 became hundreds. And suddenly, the private struggle of one child had connected to thousands of others. That was the consequence no advisor had predicted. The silence had isolated the family, but the truth created recognition. And that recognition couldn't be controlled. The media reacted in layers. One front page placed Catherine's image beneath the words "A Mother's Voice," with Louis's phrase printed just below. That framing mattered. It didn't present him as fragile. It presented recovery as strength. But not everyone accepted the narrative. Some demanded answers. Why the silence? Why the delay? Why weren't earlier absences explained? The palace held its line. A child's health was not public property. They had shared enough. No more. That boundary was intentional, and it signaled something critical. This wasn't a full opening. It was a controlled shift. Then, pressure returned from another direction. One phrase in Catherine's statement, "The moment we feared recovery," had changed direction, triggered a surge of speculation. Advisors immediately recommended a follow-up clarification to contain it. But Catherine refused. Explaining that moment meant exposing details they had already chosen to protect. And for the first time, her position overruled the instinct to manage perception. The story would not be expanded. It would be contained, even if that meant unanswered questions. William watched that moment and understood something he hadn't before. Privacy alone wasn't protection. And silence, if held too long, could create isolation. Catherine understood the balance. From the other side, honesty had given Louis strength, but it couldn't become exposure. Between those two realizations, a new boundary formed, one that didn't exist before. Charles later admitted, in private, that the monarchy hadn't been weakened by what happened. It had adapted. But that adaptation came with a cost, because now the line between silence and truth had been crossed once, and it could be crossed again. And that's where the tension remains. Because the palace proved it could reveal just enough to reshape a narrative without losing control, but the question that still lingers is far more dangerous. What happens the next time silence starts to look like something else, and someone inside decides it has to be broken again?